contract was already signed before she entered the room. She just didn't know it yet. And that specific moment of not knowing, that last breath of innocence before the world revealed what it had been doing behind her back, that is where this story begins. Not with the betrayal itself, but with the second before it. The second where Adaora Nwachukwu was still just a woman in a burgundy dress, walking through a rain-hammered building in Seoul, South Korea, believing she was going to dinner. She was not going to dinner. She was going to the most important negotiation of her life. And the man who had arranged it, the man she had loved for 3 years, the man whose mother she had met, whose dreams she had financed with her patience and her belief, was already on his knees in the lobby downstairs, having decided quietly, deliberately, that she was the most valuable thing he owned. His name was Emeka Okafor, and what he did to Adaora on that rainy Thursday night in Seoul is the kind of thing that either destroys a woman completely or turns her into something the people who underestimated her will never recover from. Adaora was not destroyed, but Emeka would spend the rest of his life learning the true cost of what he gambled away. Stay with this story, because what happens next will shake something loose inside you. And by the end, you will understand exactly why some women go quiet before they go dangerous. Before we go any further into this story, tell us in the comments right now, where in the world are you watching from? We have viewers from Lagos to London, from Seoul to Atlanta, and we want to see this community show up tonight. Drop your city or country below. We read every single one. And if you are new to this channel, click that subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. We are here every week with stories that pull you in, hold you there, and send you back into your life to understand who Adaora Nwachukwu was when she walked into that penthouse. You have to go back to Onitsha. Not the Onitsha of travel guides or geography textbooks, the real Onitsha. The city that breathes commerce and noise and color from before sunrise, where the market is a living organism that never fully sleeps, where women carry impossible loads on their heads with the posture of queens and the endurance of iron. Adaora grew up in a modest compound near the waterfront. The first daughter of a schoolteacher mother named Ngozi, who had raised 2 children alone after her husband died of a cardiac event when Adaora was 9 years old. Ngozi Nwachukwu did not collapse. She reorganized. She went back to teaching full-time. She took private tutoring students on weekends. She grew a small vegetable plot behind the compound that she sold from every Saturday morning. She did all of this without once allowing her daughters to see the full weight of it. And she did it while making sure that Adaora and her younger sister Chisom ate properly, studied seriously, and understood one thing above all others. Adaora, she would say, in the particular Igbo cadence that held both warmth and warning. Onye wetara oji wetara ndu. The one who brings cola brings life, but the one who receives it must know its value. Never let anyone decide what you are worth, Nen. Not a man. Not the world. You. Only you. Adaora had absorbed this the way children absorb things their parents say when they don't know they're being listened to. Completely, permanently, at a level below conscious memory. She carried it into every exam room, every boardroom, every country she moved to in pursuit of building the life her mother had worked herself to the edge of exhaustion to make possible. By 27, She was in Seoul on a postgraduate scholarship, studying financial forensics at one of the city's top universities. By 29, she was employed at an international compliance firm, specializing in corruption auditing for multinational clients. She was the woman in the room who could look at a spreadsheet and find the lie buried in row 47, column C, disguised as a rounding error. She had a reputation for being relentless and methodical and almost preternaturally calm under pressure. She sent money home every month without exception. She called Chisholm every Sunday and listened to her sister's long, gloriously detailed accounts of university life. Chisholm was the kind of person who could turn a trip to the campus library into a 20-minute story involving 3 misunderstandings and an abandoned umbrella. And Adaora never once told her to get to the point, because Chisholm's stories were a country she could visit when Seoul felt too far from everything she loved. She was careful with people, selective. She had learned early that intelligence without discernment is just expensive foolishness. And she applied the same forensic attention to relationships that she applied to financial documents. Which is why, and this is the part that would haunt her later, the part she would turn over in her mind at 2 a.m. for months after, which is why she could not fully explain how she had missed what Emeka Okafor was doing right in front of her face. She had met him in her 2nd year in Seoul, at a postgraduate networking event where he had walked up to her mid-sentence in a conversation she was having with someone else, inserted himself with the cheerful audacity of a man who had never once in his life been told he was too much, and said, in crisp Igbo that landed in that crowded Korean room like a warm hand on a cold day, "Ne, biko, onye obo." Tell me how a woman with that kind of posture ended up in Seoul and not running a small country. She had almost walked away. She hadn't. That was the beginning. Emeka Okafor was the kind of Nigerian man who knew how to make a woman feel seen in the most granular, specific, particular way. The kind that doesn't feel like a performance, because it is delivered with such precision that it seems like recognition. He remembered the name of Adaora's mother before she told him twice. He asked about Chisholm by name. He learned 3 phrases in her Onitsha dialect and deployed them at moments that made her laugh with genuine surprise. He was doing an MBA. He talked about entrepreneurship with the fire of a man who had a real vision. He had a business idea, a logistics technology company that would optimize last-mile delivery across West Africa. And when he talked about it, sitting across from her in a small Korean restaurant with 2 bowls of sanduba jjigae steaming between them, she believed him the way you believe someone when the believing feels like the most sensible thing in the world. They fell into each other like 2 people who had been waiting, separately and without knowing it, for exactly this collision. For 2 years, it was the best relationship of Adaora's adult life. And then, slowly, quietly, with the particular invisibility of damage that happens underground, it began to deteriorate. She noticed the evasions before she understood them. Emeka, who had always been open to the point of exhausting, began to have conversations she wasn't invited into. Phone calls he took in other rooms, a new tightness around his eyes when she asked about the business. Cancelled dinners explained vaguely. A trip to Japan that he mentioned 3 days after returning, as if he had forgotten to tell her he was going, or had decided it was easier if she didn't know in advance. She noticed, she asked, he reassured. And she, the woman who could find corruption in a column C rounding error, chose, for a period of approximately 8 months, to believe the reassurances because she was in love. Because love does something specific to the forensic mind. It introduces a bias toward the interpretation that doesn't require you to lose what you have. And what she had, she thought, was worth protecting with a little selective blindness. She would regret that logic later, but not in the way you might expect. The night of the penthouse started as an ordinary Thursday. Adaora had worked late. She was in the early stages of a new audit, a politically sensitive corruption case involving a national congressman named Cho Dae-jung, whose public infrastructure contracts had begun showing statistical anomalies that her firm had been quietly engaged to examine. She had taken a taxi home, changed out of her work clothes, and was considering whether she had the energy to cook or whether Chisholm's Sunday call, 3 days away, would sustain her through whatever sad dinner she assembled from her refrigerator, when Emeka called. "Come to dinner," he said. "I have a driver coming for you." "Nice place, you deserve it." Something in his voice was slightly off. She catalogued it and set it aside. "What's the occasion? Does there need to be one?" "Emeka, just come," he said. "Please, I need to see you." The driver arrived in a car that was several categories above what Emeka could afford, which she noted and filed. She was taken not to a restaurant, but to a building in Gangnam, one of the most expensive addresses in Seoul, and escorted by 2 men in dark suits to an elevator that required a key card she was not given. She was not the one with the key card. That is when she understood that she was not a guest. She was a delivery. When the elevator opened on the 43rd floor, she saw Emeka in the lobby, on his knees, not metaphorically, literally on his knees on polished marble, with the expression of a man who has run out of every resource except the hope that the person he loves will absorb the cost of his failure. "Adaora." He, yes, reached for her hand as the men moved her past him toward another set of doors. She stopped. She looked down at him with the precise, unnerving calm of a woman who is processing something too large to react to in real time. "What did you do?" she asked. His face collapsed. "I was going to fix it. I swear I was going to fix it before you found out. It was a business deal that went wrong, and then I borrowed to cover it, and then I borrowed again. And the man upstairs, Adaora, he owns the debt now, all of it. 200 million won, and he has an arrangement he wants to discuss. It's temporary, I promise you. It's 20 months and then..." "How much?" she said. 200 million. Not the debt. How long have you known you were going to bring me here tonight?" The silence that followed was the most honest answer he gave her in the entire conversation. She pulled her hand from his and walked toward the doors. If you're still watching up to now, type "I'm still here" in the comment section. Because this story is about to break open in ways that will change how you think about strength, love, and what a woman is truly capable of when everything she trusted turns to smoke. The penthouse office of Jae-won Ryuk smelled like cedar wood and absolute control. He was seated behind a desk that cost more than most people's annual salary, in a charcoal suit with no tie, with the stillness of a man who had made peace long ago. with the amount of power he held and the weight of what it required. He was 41 years old. He was, by Korean business press estimation, worth approximately $3 billion across a hotel empire that spanned 7 countries. He was also, by quieter and more reliable accounts, connected to networks that operated in the space between legal and efficient. The space where powerful men go when the law moves too slowly for their purposes. He looked at Adaora when she entered the room the way she would later describe to Chisholm as a man who has read the file but is now seeing whether the file was accurate. There was a contract on the desk. She noticed the drawer was slightly open. She did not look at the drawer twice. She made herself look only at him. "So let me understand this correctly," she said. Her voice was a frequency below anger, something more controlled and therefore more frightening. "The man I was going to marry offered me to you as collateral." Jae-won-ryuk inclined his head slightly, not agreement, not denial. Acknowledgement. 20 months, he said. A public marriage. You would serve as my wife for appearances. My company is currently navigating a period of political scrutiny that requires personal stability. There is a payment of 500 million won, transferred to your accounts directly. And Emeka Okafor's debt is cleared in full. The rain against the glass was the only sound. "And if I refuse?" Adaora asked. "He is arrested tomorrow morning. Financial fraud. The case is documented and ready to file." A pause. "There are other charges attached. It would be a long time before he saw anything other than a cell." She looked at this man. This precise, unreadable, terrifyingly calm man. And she thought about her mother in Onitsha. She thought about Chisholm, 22 years old and laughing too loudly at her own jokes on Sunday calls. She thought about what she had built in this city with her own intelligence and her own relentlessness and her own absolute refusal to be reduced. And then she thought something that surprised even herself. She thought, "I can work with this. I have conditions," she said. Jae-won-ryuk said nothing, which she was learning quickly was his version of permission to continue. Separate residences within whatever shared space this requires. Separate bedrooms, always, without exception or negotiation. Agreed. My career continues without interference. I am currently working a corruption audit that I will not pause, abandon, or compromise for any reason connected to this arrangement. A pause, the first one small but visible. Agreed. Financial independence. The 500 million is transferred in monthly installments from the first month, not held until the end as leverage. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite respect, but the preliminary material of it. Agreed. And my sister, Chisholm, she is in university in Enugu. Her name, her future, her safety, is completely separate from this arrangement. If she is touched, affected, or used in any way as pressure, the contract is void, and I go public with every detail of how it was formed. The silence that followed this one was longer. "You came prepared," he said. "I come prepared to everything," she said. He reached forward and slid the contract toward her. She picked it up. She read every line, not quickly, not performatively, but with the full forensic attention of a woman who found lies in column C. And when she was satisfied that her conditions had been accurately inserted by some very fast legal assistant working in an adjacent room, she picked up the pen. She looked at him one final time before she signed. "I will marry you," she said. "But don't mistake compliance for obedience. They are not the same thing, and I will not allow you to confuse them." She signed, and Jae-won Ryuk, who had sat across from presidents and criminal networks and hostile acquisition boards and had not visibly reacted to any of them, looked at Adaora Nwachukwu for a moment that was almost something other than composure. He said, "Understood." The wedding was 19 days later. It was not a celebration. It was a production, managed by Jae-won's communications team with the precision of a military operation. 60 guests, none of them Adaora's. 3 media outlets tipped off in advance by a PR consultant who charged a figure Adaora found obscene and effective in equal measure. The photographs were clean, controlled, and told a story that was not entirely false. There was a Nigerian woman, and there was Jae-won Ryuk, and they were legally married. Everything else was architecture. She wore ivory. She had chosen it herself. Ivory with gold threading at the neckline that she'd requested specifically, a quiet insistence on herself in a situation that was trying very hard to erase her. She smiled for every camera, and her smile was genuine in the way that intelligent women's public smiles are always genuine, absolutely intentional, and absolutely a boundary. That night, in the penthouse that was now her legal address, she unpacked her single suitcase into the second bedroom. Prepared for her, she noted, before she had even stated her conditions, which told her that Jae-won Ryuk had known exactly what she would ask for before she asked. And she sat on the edge of the bed and gave herself exactly 5 minutes. 5 minutes for a mecha. For the version of the future she had believed in, for the specific cruelty of loving someone who saw you as a solvable problem. Then she stood up, washed her face, opened her laptop, and went back to the Cho Daijung audit. She was not done with that story. She was barely started. And she had a feeling, the specific, tuned instrument feeling of a forensic mind encountering a pattern it has not yet fully mapped. That Cho Dae-jung and the penthouse she was sitting in were connected in ways that neither man had yet understood she would find. She was right. But that revelation would come later. First, she had to learn who Jae-won Ryuk actually was. They developed, in the early weeks, the careful choreography of 2 people who are sharing space without sharing anything else. Jae-won left before 7 every morning. He returned after 10. 3 times a week, by PR directive, they had dinner together at restaurants where the ambient lighting was good for photographs, and the tables were far enough from others that conversations remained private. Society columns ran speculation. 2 journalists attempted to contact Adaora directly and received from her a silence so complete it became its own kind of statement. The dinners were where she first began to see past the architecture of him. It started with Ginger. They were at a Japanese-Korean fusion restaurant in Itaewon, the kind of place that takes itself very seriously. And she watched Jae-won systematically move every piece of pickled ginger to the far edge of his plate, with the focused discretion of a man who has been doing this in secret for 40 years and considers it a matter of personal dignity that no one acknowledge it. "You're doing it again?" she said. He looked up. "The ginger," she said. "You've moved it to the same position on 3 separate occasions across 3 separate dishes. You dislike it, but you don't want to say so." He looked at his plate, then at her. It is not relevant to the dish. It is absolutely relevant to the dish. Ginger is not garnish in Korean cuisine. It is architecture. Architecture can be removed without affecting structural integrity. Not always, she said, and held his eyes for a moment that was about more than ginger. He said nothing, but the next Sunday afternoon, when she was in the penthouse kitchen cooking ofe onugbu, bitter leaf soup, the one that reminded her most directly of her mother's kitchen, he appeared in the doorway in a way that suggested he had been considering appearing for several minutes before he did. The smell had filled the entire apartment within 40 minutes. Palm oil, crayfish, the particular warmth of uziza leaves, stockfish releasing its salt into the pot in a way that changed the quality of the air completely. He stood in the doorway, looking at the pot the way people look at things that don't fit their existing categories. "What is that?" he asked. "Ofe onugbu, meaning bitter leaf soup," she said. "Sit down if you want some. Leave if you don't want to watch me cook." He sat down. She served him without ceremony. He took the first spoon with the careful expression of a man operating without a map. And then his face did something small and involuntary that he did not fully succeed in suppressing. "This is—" He stopped, reconsidered the sentence. "Complex? Is that a compliment?" "It is an accurate description. Try again," she said. A pause. Something loosened by 1 degree. "It is very good," he said. "Better," she said. And then, because the soup was doing what good food does, collapsing the distance between people who have agreed to keep distance, she told him about her mother's kitchen in Onitsha. The Sunday mornings when the whole compound knew what was cooking from 2 streets away. The way she and Chisholm used to set the table with the seriousness of people performing a ceremony, because their mother had taught them that food was not fuel. It was love given a physical form, and love deserved to be received with care. He listened the way she was learning he listened. Fully, without performance, without the anxious nodding of someone constructing their response while she was still speaking. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "My mother made myeokguk on my birthday every year," he said. "Seaweed soup, Korean tradition. The mother makes it to remember the pain of giving birth, and the child eats it in acknowledgement of what they cost." A pause that held the entire weight of what he was about to say. "She died when I was 11, but I still smell it sometimes. When a kitchen gets warm in a particular way." She looked at him across the table, and for the first time since the penthouse and the contract and the ivory dress, she saw something in him that was not a billionaire or a problem or a man who had purchased her circumstances. She saw a person. She did not say anything, but she noted it. And then the Cho Dae-jung case went somewhere unexpected, and everything else accelerated. It was 3 months into the marriage when Adaora pulled a thread in the Cho audit that unraveled something she hadn't anticipated. She had been working late on a Tuesday, her laptop open at the living room table, because she had migrated there from the second bedroom without noticing. A small, unconscious choice that she chose not to examine too closely. When she found the connection between 17 shell companies registered in Busan and a single logistics address that had never shipped anything to anyone. The money moving through those shells was enormous. Public infrastructure funds, hospital construction contracts, rural school projects that existed on paper and nowhere else. 9 years of organized theft from the people who needed the money most. She was making notes when she found the name. Park Soo-yeon, director of one of the shells, former senior finance officer of Ryuk Group Hotels. She sat back. She opened the background file she had quietly compiled on Jae-won in the first 2 weeks of the arrangement. Because she was a forensic accountant, and she did not live anywhere without understanding the foundations, and she cross-referenced. Park Soo-yeon resigned from Ryuk Group 18 months ago. Cho Dae-jung's political campaign against Ryuk's business interests had begun 18 months ago. She stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then she picked up her pen and drew a new line on the connection map. She was still staring at the map when she heard the elevator. Jae-won walked in earlier than usual, which was itself unusual, and stopped when he saw her surrounded by printed documents and the red pen map in 3 browser tabs layered over each other. He looked at the documents, then at her. "Cho Dae-jung," he said, not a question. "You've known what I was working on since the beginning," she said. "I know everything that happens in this apartment." She let that sit. "Then you know I found Park Soo-yeon?" He went very still, the particular stillness of a man who has just realized that a variable he thought he controlled has moved. "You need to stop," he said. "I will not stop." "Adaora." His voice dropped to the register he used when something actually mattered. Park Soo-yeon didn't resign. She was placed. Cho has people inside my organization. She spent 14 months feeding him financial intelligence before I identified her and removed her. The campaign against my hotels is not political posturing. It is a coordinated operation to force a sell-off of 3 key properties, using manufactured regulatory violations as the mechanism. He paused. Last year he had my chief financial officer's car tampered with. My CFO survived. Cho has been preparing for every move I could make toward him for 2 years. There is no direct path. She looked at him, and then we go around him, she said. There is always a round. She turned the notepad toward him. Look at the shell structure. He's not protecting the money. He's protecting the origin of the money. The funds crossed international borders before they came back clean. That puts jurisdiction outside his reach. If I can document the origin trail completely and file through an international anti-corruption channel, he cannot suppress it. He has no hand to play. He came to the table. He sat down. He looked at the map for a long time with the full, absorbing attention he gave to things he considered worth his intelligence. "Show me from the beginning," he said. She showed him. They worked until 1:30 in the morning. He knew things about Cho's network she hadn't accessed. She knew things about the financial architecture he hadn't seen from inside the legal machinery. Together, they built something that neither of them could have built alone. And at some point, she made tea for both of them without consciously deciding to. And at some point, he started calling her by her name instead of a formal address, and neither of them mentioned either thing. That was the night the contract became something else. Neither of them named it, but they both felt the ground shift. Chisholm called on a Friday afternoon in the 4th month. She always called on Sundays, always. The call lasted 90 seconds and ended mid-sentence. Adaora called back. Voicemail. Again, voicemail. She sent a text. Nothing came back. She sat completely still for 40 seconds, and then she called Jae-won. He answered before the first ring completed. "Chisholm is not responding," she said. She called me. Call ended suddenly. She's not answering. It's been 11 minutes. A pause of 2 seconds. Don't leave the building. I'm calling you back in 3 minutes. He called in too. Her phone last pinged near Yaba in Lagos. There's a cafe near her campus. She goes to Friday afternoons. I have a contact 40 minutes from that location. They're moving now. She gripped the phone hard enough that her knuckles changed color. Who took her? I don't know yet. J1. I will find her, Adaora. That is not what I asked. I asked who took her. A pause. Cho? He said quietly. It has his pattern. The message arrived 22 minutes later on her personal number from a spoofed contact. Stop the audit. Destroy the files. You have 48 hours. Then the girl is a missing persons case. She forwarded it to J1 without a word. He called immediately. I see it. Get her back, Adaora said. Her voice was absolutely flat. The flatness of a woman who has gone somewhere beyond fear into pure operational clarity. This tells me something important, he said. They're amateurs at the coercion side. Professionals don't give timelines because timelines signal hesitation. He expected the message to frighten you into compliance. He doesn't actually want to use the leverage. He wants the leverage to do the work. And if you're wrong, I'm not wrong. J1, if you are wrong about this, then I will take apart every structure Cho Dae-jung has ever built, he said, stone by stone, until there is nothing left for him to stand on. She believed him completely. She had never in her life found that kind of certainty in a man comforting. She found it comforting now. They found Chisholm at 11:15. She was in an apartment in Lagos, not hurt, not yet, but shaking in the way people shake after fear has moved through them and left its evidence behind. J1's people reached her before the 48 hours became something worse. They brought her to a safe house. They gave her water and a blanket and a phone. When Chisholm heard her sister's voice, she started crying in the specific way she cried when she was furious and relieved simultaneously, loudly, with narration. Adaora, I need you to explain to me right now why there are Korean men in Lagos who know the name of my cafe. I need a full explanation, starting from the beginning. I deserve this. You're safe, Adaora said. That's the beginning. We start there. I want more than that. You'll get more than that. Are you hurt? No. I'm angry. Good, Adaora said. Angry means you're fine. I'm coming for you. This is the most critical moment in Adaora's story. And if this video has had you locked in from the beginning, we need you to smash that like button right now and share this video with one person who needs to hear a story about what real strength looks like. One person. Because what happens next is the part where everything comes apart and comes together. In the same breath, it was in the 5th month that the truth about Emeka fully arrived. Adaora had not been looking for it. The investigation had moved in a different direction. She was deep in the international filing strategy, with J1 building the documentation architecture layer by layer. When a background report from J1's intelligence contact flagged something in the original loan documentation, she read it at 6 in the morning with her coffee going cold beside her. Emeka's loan was dated 8 months before he had told her it existed. There were attached communications, 3 messages in a thread that Emeka had sent from a personal account that he had believed was untraceable and was not. She read them once. She read them again. In the first message, Emeka had asked if J1's organization was looking for a wife of a particular profile. He described Adaora, her profession, her integrity, her family connections, her social stability, in the tone of a man who has prepared a pitch document. In the second, he confirmed that he believed she would be agreeable under the right pressure. In the third, and this was the one that cost her the most, he wrote, "She's strong. She adapts. She'll be fine." She closed the laptop. She sat with her coffee going cold for 2 hours. Then she called Emeka. He answered on the second ring, which told her he had been expecting this call. Maybe not today, but eventually. He had always known eventually. "Adaora, I have the loan document," she said. "Dated 8 months before you told me any of this existed. I have your communications. I know you reached out first. I know you built the arrangement before you brought me to it. I know you wrote that I would be fine." Her voice was the temperature of the air before a storm. Not cold exactly, but the kind of atmospheric pressure that means something enormous is coming. "So I need you to explain to me, in your own words, what you thought you were doing." Silence. "Adaora, Don't tell me it was desperate. Don't tell me there was no choice. I've read your messages, Emeka. You calculated this. You researched it. You proposed it." Her voice didn't rise. It went lower. "You decided, in advance, that I was a solution, not a person. A solution to a problem you created. You were going to leave me anyway." She closed her eyes. "What?" she said. "You were always going to leave me. I could feel it. You were growing. You were always growing. And I could see it, Adaora. I could see you outpacing me, and I knew eventually." He stopped. "I thought if this happened, if you went through it, you'd come back to me after. I thought you'd choose me." The specific cruelty of that logic, that he had sold her to win her, sat in her chest like something physical. "You traded me," she said, "because you were afraid of losing me." "Adaora." "Do not call this number again," she said. "Not for any reason, not to apologize, not to explain, not ever." She ended the call. She went to the window. Seoul moved below her, enormous and indifferent, doing what cities do, continuing. She stood there until the grief settled into something she could carry. And then she turned away from the window and sat back at her desk and opened the Cho file and went back to work. Because she was Adaora Nwachukwu, and she had learned from a woman who worked double nursing shifts and grew vegetables at 4 a.m. that grief is not the end of the day. It is the middle of it. You feel it. You carry it. You keep going. She told J1 what she had found 3 days later, at dinner, with the clinical precision of a woman who has decided that stating facts clearly is less painful than wrapping them in emotion. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he looked at her across the table for a long moment. "You already knew," she said. "I found out in the 4th week," he said. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it was yours to discover," he said, "not mine to deliver." He paused. "And because I did not know you well enough yet to understand what you would need when you found it." She held his eyes. "And now?" He looked at her with the expression she had spent 5 months learning to read below the surface of his composure, the one that lived in the half-millimeter between control and honesty. "Now I know that you don't need protection from truth," he said. "You need truth. so you can do what you already know how to do with it. She nodded slowly. Emeka will have consequences, she said. Not from me. The Financial Crimes Unit has his name attached to 2 of Cho's subsidiary threads. It will take time, but the documentation exists, and eventually it finds him. I don't have to touch it. And Cho? He asked. The international filing is ready, she said. 3 weeks, maybe 4. Then we're close. We're close, she agreed. They ate in silence for a moment. You are different from anyone I have dealt with, he said. That is a strange thing to say at dinner. It was not meant as small talk, he said. She looked at him. Say what you mean, Ye-Wan. He looked back, at her with the full, unguarded attention of a man who has stopped performing for an audience he no longer has. I mean that I have been in this city for 20 years surrounded by people who want things from me, he said. And I have not, until this year, sat across from anyone who made me want to be the version of myself I had stopped believing existed. The silence that followed was the most honest thing he had said to her since the soup. She picked up her chopsticks. Eat your ginger, she said. He almost smiled. It is not relevant. Eat it, Jae-won. He ate it. The ambush came in the 6th month, outside a legal office in central Seoul where Adaora had gone to file the first tranche of the international documentation through a third-party channel. She was on the front steps when the shot hit the concrete wall 6 inches from her left ear. The world compressed into the pure present tense. No past, no future. Just the sound and the fractured concrete and the hand that grabbed her arm and the force of a body putting itself between her and the open street. She hit the steps, and the weight above her was Jae-won, who had driven her personally that morning in a decision she hadn't questioned. And she heard the second shot, and then she heard the sound that she would carry with her for the rest of her life. The involuntary, entirely human sound he made when the bullet found him. At the hospital, she sat in a fluorescent corridor for 3 hours. She did not cry. She sat and she thought, with the specific clarity that fear produces when it is fully inhabited rather than suppressed, about what the last 6 months had been, about what they had actually been, below the contract and the PR dinners and the careful maintenance of distance. She thought about the kitchen on Sunday, about 1 a.m. and the red pen map, about his voice on the phone, I will find her, carrying the absolute weight of a man who means every word and has the means to make meaning real, about the scars on his back that she had seen once when the light was particular and he didn't know she was looking. 3 parallel lines across his left shoulder that told a story she hadn't yet been given. About the way he had said, I have not, until this year, sat across from anyone who made me want to be the version of myself I had stopped believing existed. At 3:40 in the morning, a surgeon came and told her the bullet had been removed, and the patient was stable. She pressed the heels of her hands against her closed eyes for a long, long breath. Then she stood up and walked into the recovery room, and she was not supposed to be there yet. But the night nurse took one look at her face and stepped aside. He was pale. Jae-won Ryuk, who was always so precisely, immovably himself, lying in a hospital bed, looking approximately as mortal as any other human being who had been shot. He found her when she came in. You're not supposed to be in here, he said, rough at the edges, still him. I make my own decisions about where I'm supposed to be, she said, She pulled a chair to the bedside and sat. They were quiet for a long time. The machines kept their steady accounting. Through the window, Seoul was beginning its slow migration from dark to gray. "The contract," he said eventually. 2 months left. "I know. When it ends." He paused, measured his breathing. "Walk away if you need to. What we built against Cho stands regardless. You will be protected. I want that to be clear." She looked at him. "You're offering me an exit before I've asked for one." "I'm offering you a choice," he said. "You have spent 7 months inside a situation you did not choose. I want you to have the experience of choosing freely, with nothing owed and nothing at stake." She sat with that for a moment. Then, "What if I told you that I had audited this arrangement completely, every variable, every assumption, every thread traced back to its origin? And my conclusion was that the return on this investment has significantly exceeded the initial projections." He looked at her. "I would say," he said carefully, "that I am not entirely certain what you are measuring." "Yes, you are," she said. The machines beeped. Outside, the city began its morning. "Adaora," he said. "Jaewon." "Be certain," he said. "Not choosing this because leaving is unfamiliar. Actually certain." "I am a forensic accountant," she said. "I do not reach conclusions without complete evidence. And I have complete evidence." She held his eyes across the bed rail. "I have been certain for 2 months. I was waiting for the right time to say it. And a hospital room at 4 in the morning is the right time." "It is exactly the right time," she said. "Because right now there is nothing between us except the truth. No contract, no PR calendar, no ginger on the side of the plate." She paused. Just this. He reached over with his good arm and found her hand. He held it. Neither of them said anything else. They didn't need to. Cho Dae-jung was arrested on a Wednesday morning in September. The international anti-corruption filing had triggered simultaneous action across 3 jurisdictions. Financial crimes units in Korea, Singapore, and the Netherlands executed warrants in coordination at 7 in the morning. 17 associated figures were taken in for questioning. The shell companies, once the origin documentation went public, collapsed with the specific speed of structures that were never built to withstand scrutiny. Only to avoid it, Adaora watched the arrest footage on her laptop with her morning coffee in the Ryuk Group penthouse kitchen. No elation, just the deep, quiet satisfaction of truth arriving at its destination after a long journey. She thought about every late night, every red pen map, every thread pulled carefully until the whole fabric gave way. She thought, this is what the work is for. Emeka's consequences came 6 weeks later, through channels she had never touched. His name had appeared in 2 of Cho's subsidiary investigations, connected through financial transactions he had assumed were buried. And once the Cho case unsealed, investigators followed every thread. Assets frozen, formal inquiry opened. The story ran in 2 Nigerian newspapers and 1 Korean financial publication. Adaora did not read the articles. Not because she was protecting herself from them, but because she had decided a long time ago in a hospital corridor at 4 in the morning that she was done spending her attention on people who had spent their attention calculating what she was worth. Her worth was not a calculation. It was not a figure in a column. It was the entirety of who she was. and she had spent 31 years becoming someone whose value could not be contained in any document, any contract, any spreadsheet. Emeka had known that on some level. He had just made the wrong bet about what to do with the knowledge. The contract expired on a Thursday. Jae-won placed the final transfer confirmation on the breakfast table. A single document, clean and formal. The legal close of the arrangement that had begun in a penthouse with a contract and a gun in a half-open drawer and a woman who refused to scream. He stood on the other side of the table. She looked at the document. Then she looked at him, recovered fully now, himself again. That extraordinary composure that she had spent 7 months learning to see through, and could now see through completely. She knew what lived behind the stillness. She knew about the boy who lost his mother at 11 and still smelled seaweed soup in warm kitchens. She knew about the brother he did not speak of. She knew about the scars and the cost of misplaced trust and the specific loneliness of a man who has so much power that almost no one ever speaks to him like a person. She knew him. "You're free," he said. She picked up the document, read it, set it back down. "What would you do?" she said, "if I told you I don't want to be?" He looked at her. "Then I would ask you to be certain," he said, for the second time. Because he was Jae-won Ryuk, and he needed to hear it more than once before he let himself believe it. "I signed a contract with you once," she said, "and I held every condition of it. You know what my word costs." She met his eyes across the breakfast table in the morning light. I'm certain." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "There is something I would like to show you." "What?" "Paris," he said, "in the spring." She tilted her head. "Is that an invitation or a question?" "It is whatever you want it to be," he said. She considered him, this man, this impossible and precise and slowly opening man who had come into her life through an arrangement built on betrayal and had, somewhere in the space, between a soup pot and a hospital corridor and a red pen map, become the person she chose. "Then it's an acceptance," she said. Paris happened the following April. Because between the breakfast table and spring, there was an empire to stabilize and a career to advance, and a very long video call with Chisholm. 3 hours, 2 meals consumed during it. No umbrella story, but an extremely detailed account of Chisholm's opinion of Jae-won based on 40 minutes of observation during a Lagos visit, during which Chisholm said, in the Onitsha dialect that they used when they wanted to say something true and private, "Adaora nani? The way he looks at you when you're talking to someone else." That's a man who has already decided. "I know," Adaora said. "Does he know you know?" "He's starting to," she said. "Mama is going to be insufferable," Chisholm said. "Mama already knows," Adaora said. "She called me in February and said, 'The way you describe this man's faults, Adaora, tells me you are paying very close attention to his virtues.'" Chisholm burst out laughing. "She's not wrong. She's never wrong. She is deeply, profoundly, irritatingly never wrong," Adaora agreed. The proposal happened on a Tuesday morning in Paris because it was, as Adaora later told Chisholm, a very Jae-won choice, deeply unromantic in the timing and devastating in the execution. In a small square near their hotel, coffee in paper cups, pigeons arguing nearby with the passionate conviction of creatures who have no concept of the moment they are interrupting. He stopped walking. She stopped because he did. he held a ring, commissioned, she would discover later, from an Igbo Korean designer based in Abuja. Gold and deep green stone, angular and deliberate and unlike anything she had ever seen, made specifically for her and no one else. "I want to ask you something," he said. She waited. "Marry me," he said. Not because of what existed between us before. Not because of what either of us needed at a particular moment when we were both more desperate than we admitted. Marry me because of who you are. Because of what I know about you now, which is more than I have known about any person in my life. And because of what I believe we are still capable of becoming. He looked at her with the full, unguarded, unprotected attention of a man who has finally taken down every wall, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Marry me, because you want to. Only because of that. She took the ring from him, put it on herself, because she was Adaora Nwachukwu, daughter of Ngozi, raised in Onitsha, built by everything that had tried to break her, and looked at it on her hand in the Paris morning light. Then she looked at him. "I have wanted to," she said, "for quite some time." He exhaled, the involuntary, full-body exhale of a man who has been holding something enormous for a long time. And she stepped forward and put her palm against his jaw. And he closed his eyes for a moment. Just a moment. Like someone receiving something they had stopped expecting. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay," he said. The pigeons continued their argument. Paris continued around them. And sunshine. Adaora, who had been sunshine to the people who loved her since she was small, because her mother said her arrival had felt like a room filling with light, stood in a square in Paris in April, and chose, freely and fully, and with complete forensic certainty, the life that she was going to walk into next. The wedding was in December. 2 ceremonies, because Adaora Nwachukwu was not the kind of woman to collapse 2 cultures into one event and call it a celebration. The first in Onitsha, in the compound where she had grown up, where Ngozi presided over the traditional introduction ceremony with the authority of a woman who has earned every opinion she has ever held. There was Egwu music and the particular Onitsha brand of high life that gets into the bones of people who grew up with it. There was food enough for the entire street. There was Chisholm dancing until she lost a sandal and kept dancing anyway. There was a moment when Adaora looked across the compound at Jaewon Ryuk, sitting between her uncle and a neighbor who had known her since she was 4 years old, and was now explaining something about yam cultivation with great intensity. And the man was listening with complete attention, nodding at the right moments, and her uncle was laughing. She thought, he's always listening. That is who he is. The second ceremony was in Seoul, private, small, real. 20 people who had been selected not for appearance, but for meaning. The food was both tables, ofe onugbu and Korean braised galbi, jollof rice and japchae, ogiri spice and doenjang in the same kitchen, and somehow harmonious. The warmth in the room was not manufactured for cameras. It was just warmth, the kind that builds between people who have been through something real together and come out on the other side of it still standing. She wore both, not separately, both. Her designer had fought her on the concept, and then, 3 weeks into the commission, had sent her a photograph of the first draft with a message that said simply, "You were right. This is the most beautiful thing I have made." The gele was wrapped in the Onitsha style her aunt had taught her, deep gold fabric with threads of jade green. The yogori, the top portion of the hanbok, was ivory with gold embroidery that matched the galley threading in a way that looked intentional because it was intentional, every detail of it considered, every choice hers. She was Adaora Nwachukwu. She was the daughter of Ngozi. She was the sister of Shizum. She was a forensic accountant who found lies in column C and truths in the spaces between numbers. She was the woman who had walked into a penthouse in the rain and chosen, under impossible pressure, not to be reduced. And she was finally, freely, the wife of the man who had looked at her across a contract and understood, even then, even in that room, that what he was looking at could not be purchased, only earned. Emeka Okafor watched the wedding coverage on his phone alone in a hotel room in Abuja. 3 months into an asset freeze and a formal inquiry that would take 2 years to fully resolve. He watched the photographs, the compound in Onitsha, the compound in Seoul, the gold gel and the ivory jogori, Adaora laughing at something her sister had said. And he understood, completely and irrevocably, the nature of what he had lost. Not because she had taken it from him, but because he had never understood its value until it was standing freely in its own light, unchosen by him, choosing for itself. Adaora never thought about Emeka Okafor that December. She had no reason to. She was too busy building the life she had chosen. But there is a thing she would say. Later, when people asked about the story, but when the story got out, condensed into headlines, translated across languages, repeated in the kind of contexts that strip complexity into catchphrase, they would ask, "Gatigar, how did you survive it?" And she would give different answers depending on who was asking. To journalists, she gave the precise, careful answer. To Shizum, she gave the real one. "I survived it," she told her sister on a Sunday call from the Seoul penthouse that was now entirely and genuinely her home. "Because Mama taught me that being underestimated is not a vulnerability. It is a tool. When people think they know your worth, they stop watching what you're doing. And when they stop watching, you do your work," Chisholm said. "You do your work," Adaora agreed. She looked out the window at Seoul in December, lit and cold and enormous, and entirely indifferent to the smallness of individual stories and the enormity of individual lives. She thought about the contract on the desk, the gun in the drawer that she had never mentioned to anyone except Chisholm, who had said, "Wait, there was a gun?" with exactly the energy the situation deserved. She thought about ivory dresses and red pen maps and seaweed soup and Igbo words pronounced badly with total sincerity, and a hand finding hers in a hospital room at 4 a.m. She thought about what her mother had told her, in the Igbo that held both warmth and warning. Never let a man decide your worth. She had not let a man decide it. Not Emeka, who had priced her. Not Jawan, who had contracted her. Not Cho, who had threatened her. Not any of them. She had decided, and the world, slowly, through the work of truth and time and absolute refusal to be smaller than she was, had agreed. And that is the story of Adaora Nwachukwu. If this story moved something in you, if it reached somewhere that needed reaching, then do something with that feeling right now. Like this video. Share it with one person who needs to hear that their worth is not negotiable. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because we have more coming. Stories built from real emotion, real stakes, and the kind of wisdom that only comes from people who have walked through fire and come out knowing exactly who they are. Drop a comment and tell us what Adaora's story meant to you. And if you want to know what happens to the woman who disappeared on her own wedding night, and the secret her husband kept for 10 years, make sure you're here when that story drops. Subscribe now. We'll be waiting for you.